They say cruises are all fun and luxury, but what happens when the ship itself becomes a nightmare? From balconies that vanish into thin air, to grand ballrooms filled with laughter from unseen guests, to midnight buffets where passengers never return, and ghostly crew who serve drinks you're never seen finishing. These are not stories made up for clicks. Every encounter has been carefully rechecked, verified, and sourced from real accounts on Reddit and first-hand testimonies. Tonight, on Midnight Outcry, we bring you 5 terrifying true cruise ship encounters that will make you question every vacation at sea. Dim the lights, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and comment your thoughts below if you dare. The announcement came at exactly 11:59 p.m., clear as day, echoing across the speakers even though most of us were already in bed. Ladies and gentlemen, you are invited to a special midnight buffet in the grand dining hall. An unforgettable feast awaits you. But when I checked the daily cruise schedule earlier that evening, there had been no mention of any midnight event at all. My name's Evan Carter. I'm 35 from Louisville, Kentucky. I work in IT support, a boring desk job that keeps me chained to a headset and glowing screens, fixing other people's mistakes. This cruise was supposed to be my reset, a week of quiet, salt air, and time away from bosses who can't restart their own machines. I came alone, partly because my last relationship collapsed 6 months ago, partly because I thought maybe solitude would clear my head. I'm not the partying type. I'm the kind who brings a book to the pool and listens to other people laugh. But I'd saved up for this trip, and I wanted to believe I'd come back a little lighter than I left. The ship had been dazzling in daylight. White steel shining like a pearl, polished railings that caught the sun, a never-ending hum of chatter and announcements, and clinking glasses. At night, though, it changed. The corridors went too quiet. The hum of the engines below deck felt louder, vibrating faintly through the soles of my shoes. The air smelled different, too. Less like ocean breeze, more like disinfectant and carpet fibers baked under fluorescent bulbs. Sometimes, when I walked back from dinner, I'd hear faint conversations through cabin doors, muffled laughter. But tonight, after that strange announcement, the whole deck outside my door was hushed. I stood there for a while, telling myself it had to be some glitch. Someone hacked the PA system, or maybe I'd imagined it, half asleep. But curiosity claws deeper the more you try to ignore it. When I cracked my cabin door, the hallway stretched empty, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. No one else was stepping out. No doors creaked open. Just me. That was the first moment I felt something was off, like the invitation wasn't for everyone, only for the ones listening closely enough. I walked toward the elevators, each footstep muffled in the thick carpet. The call button glowed faintly when I pressed it. The cab arrived without a sound. When the doors opened, the light flickered once, then steadied. I stepped inside, pressed for deck 5, the deck where the dining hall was. The elevator jolted and began its descent. My reflection in the steel doors looked pale, almost distorted in the wavering light. For a heartbeat, I thought the reflection's eyes didn't quite match my own, but the cab dinged before I could think longer. Deck 5. The hallway stretched familiar, bright posters advertising comedy shows, the faint smell of lemon polish, and, farther down, the ornate double doors to the grand dining hall. The brass handles gleamed. The placard bolted to the wall read in neat print, "Closed after 10:30 p.m. No entry." I hesitated. That announcement had been clear. Grand dining hall, midnight buffet. Yet the place looked deserted. No music, no voices, not even the faintest whiff of food. I tried the handle. Locked. Solid. And then I heard it. Clink. A glass meeting another glass. Muffled laughter followed. Then the faint hum of music, slipping under the crack in the door like smoke. Not modern music. Not the kind of upbeat pop they blasted by the pool in the afternoons. This was strings. A violin, low and smooth. A piano chiming in, crisp and deliberate. I pressed my ear to the seam of the door. The sounds sharpened, chatter, cutlery against plates, glasses raised in toasts. I could picture it. Hundreds of guests feasting inside, servers weaving between tables, chandeliers spilling gold light across polished floors. But none of it should have been happening. My throat felt dry. I backed away, pulse hammering. Just then, the music surged louder, like someone had leaned close to a speaker and turned the dial up just for me. The laughter echoed brighter. I thought I heard my own name, whispered like a toast, to Evan. Then, silence. Dead silence. I froze, staring at the locked door. My reflection in the brass handle seemed to twist with a faint smirk. My chest tightened. I turned to leave, only to see the elevator doors wide open again, though I hadn't pressed the button. For a split second, I saw a man standing inside. Tall, black suit, head slightly tilted, as if listening. His outline was faint, like my eyes couldn't quite decide if he was real. I blinked, and the cab was empty. I should have gone back to my cabin. Instead, I stepped toward it. And when the doors slid shut, I swear I heard faint music again, this time coming from inside the elevator walls. The elevator lowered me again, but when the doors opened this time, I wasn't on deck 5 anymore. The sign on the wall said Deck 7, Lounges and Entertainment. Yet the hallway looked wrong. The carpeting was darker, the lighting dimmer, like the bulbs were older. The posters on the walls didn't show comedians or karaoke contests. They showed advertisements for long-past cruise seasons, sepia photographs of guests in vintage clothing, smiling wide as they held champagne glasses. Their eyes looked strange, though, too dark and hollow for real photographs. I stepped out cautiously, each sound of my shoes muffled by thick carpeting that smelled faintly of mildew. The ship hummed beneath me, deeper now, vibrating faintly in the floor like a heartbeat. From down the hall came the faintest aroma, roasted meats, warm bread, the sharp tang of wine. My stomach tightened with hunger, but it wasn't the pleasant kind. It was more like a lure, a bait dragging me forward. Halfway down the hall, I saw them. 3 passengers, walking side by side. I recognized 2 from dinner earlier in the week, an older couple from Minnesota, chatty and kind, always telling me about their grandkids. They were still in their evening clothes, but their faces looked blank, slack, as if they were sleepwalking. The third man trailed behind, a crew member in uniform, but his eyes were glassy too. None of them acknowledged me. They walked to the end of the hall, where another set of double doors stood. The handles glowed faintly gold in the dim light. Without hesitation, they pushed through and entered. As the doors swung closed, I caught a glimpse inside. Chandeliers, long tables stacked with food, whole roasted birds, pyramids of fruit, desserts shining with glaze. Guests filled the hall, their faces pale in the golden light. Some raised glasses in silent toasts. Others bent low over their plates, eating mechanically, never stopping to breathe. The air inside shimmered faintly, like heat waves rising from pavement. And then the doors shut with a heavy click. I hurried to them, grabbed the handles, and pulled, locked. I pressed my ear against the seam again. The music was clearer this time, violins sweeping in grand waves, laughter bubbling underneath. But it was wrong. Off-key, stretched, like someone mimicking what joy should sound like. I whispered, "Hello, can anyone hear me?" For a second, the sounds inside stopped. Then, all at once, dozens of voices whispered my name. Not shouted, whispered. Soft, intimate, like they were already close behind the door, waiting. I staggered back. My pulse roared in my ears. The elevator dinged again at the far end of the hall. I turned, but no one was inside. The doors slid open and held. I forced myself to walk back, each step feeling heavier. I wanted to run, to hide, but a strange pull made me keep moving. Just before I stepped into the elevator, I looked back at the dining hall doors. They were cracked open now, and in that sliver of golden light, I saw something I can't explain. A hand reaching through, not pale, not tan, gray, the fingers too long, curling lazily, like beckoning me in. The skin shimmered faintly, almost translucent, as though something underneath it was moving. I slammed the elevator button, hard. The doors closed, cutting off the sight, the smell, the whispers. The elevator shot upward so fast it made my stomach lurch. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. When the doors opened again, I was back on deck 9, near my cabin. Everything looked normal, bright, clean, humming with the faint sounds of late-night TV through walls. For a moment I convinced myself I'd dreamed it, a trick of exhaustion, maybe even some elaborate prank staged by the crew. I stumbled back into my room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. And that's when the phone on my nightstand rang. Not my cell phone, the cabin's landline. The screen didn't show a number, just a single word, BFN. The phone kept ringing. Not a normal ring either. It was slower, deeper, echoing faintly in the cabin like it came from inside the walls. Every nerve in my body told me not to answer, but the longer it rang, the harder it was to resist. My hand hovered over the receiver, shaking. On the 12th ring, I gave in and lifted it. I didn't say anything. For a second, silence. Then, faintly, I heard the clinking of glasses, the swell of violins. And layered over the music, 100 voices whispered together, "We saved you a seat." I slammed the phone down so hard, it rattled the lamp beside the bed. My breath came fast, ragged, as if I'd just sprinted. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks on my cabin door. I froze. The knock wasn't impatient. It wasn't polite. It was deliberate, steady, like whoever or whatever was out there already knew I was inside. "Seven." A woman's voice, muffled through the door, sing-song soft. "We've been waiting for you. You don't want to be rude." My skin crawled. No one knew my name. Not the staff, not the guests I'd chatted with. I'd kept to myself this whole trip. So how did they know? I crept to the door, pressing my eye to the peephole. At first, nothing. Just the hallway. Then someone leaned into view. It was the older woman from Minnesota, the one I'd seen earlier, slack-faced, walking toward the buffet doors. But her face wasn't slack now. Her mouth stretched impossibly wide, lips peeled back too far, revealing teeth sharpened into points. Her eyes were solid black, no whites left. She tilted her head against the peephole and whispered, "Come eat, Evan. It's delicious." I stumbled back, clapping a hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. The knock started again, harder this time, shaking the door on its frame. My suitcase rattled against the wall. I glanced at the balcony door, my only way out. The sliding glass door groaned as I shoved it open. Cold night air blasted in, carrying the salty sting of the ocean. Waves churned black below, endless. My heart pounded. Jumping was suicide, but staying meant something worse. Behind me, the cabin door shuddered with each new knock, and then silence. I turned slowly, breath caught in my throat. The door was still. I edged closer, listening. Nothing. No voice, no knocks. Then the cabin phone rang again, louder, harsher. This time, the screen didn't read Buffett. It said, "Balcony." My stomach dropped. Before I could react, I felt it, the faintest tap on my shoulder. I spun around. The balcony wasn't empty anymore. A table stood there now. A gleaming white tablecloth, tall candles flickering despite the wind. Platters of food steaming, glasses filled with dark red wine. And sitting at the table, smiling at me, was the old woman. The black-eyed, sharp-toothed grin stretched wider than ever. She lifted her glass, tilting it toward me in a mock toast. "Bon appétit." The phone inside the cabin rang one more time. And over the ring, dozens of voices joined in unison, echoing across the sea, across the night. Join us, join us, join us. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own shoes, eyes locked on the impossible dinner table set up on my balcony. The smell hit me next, sweet, roasted meat, dripping with fat. Spices clung to the air, mixing with the salt of the sea. My stomach turned as I realized the meat didn't look right. The cuts were too irregular, too human. The woman at the head of the table, if I could still call her a woman, patted the chair beside her. Sit, eat. The others are waiting. I tore my gaze away long enough to glance into the cabin. The phone was still ringing, the screen still flashing balcony. Each shrill tone stabbed at my skull, demanding I choose. Stay inside, open the door to whatever was knocking, step outside, sit at that cursed table, or jump. My chest heaved as I gripped the railing, eyes locked on the violent waves below. The drop was dizzying. If I hit the water, the ship would leave me behind in seconds. I'd drown, but maybe drowning was better than that. The knocks on the cabin door started again. Furious now, violent, splintering the wood. With each blow, laughter bled through, mixed with the tinkling of silverware, the clinking of wine glasses. The whole ship seemed to be dining together without me. Heaven. The woman's voice rasped, lower now, guttural. Don't make us come get you. Her black eyes glinted in the candlelight, fixed on me. The door behind me cracked open a few inches, wood splintering as pale, bony fingers curled through the gap. More hands followed, prying it wider. One face pressed against the split, another guest I had seen at the buffet doors earlier. His jaw hung open, dislocated, a wet gurgle spilling from his throat. I had seconds. My hand clutched the railing. My legs shook. Fear screamed at me to stay frozen, to hope this nightmare would vanish if I closed my eyes. But deep inside, a clearer voice rose above the terror. Move! Now! I vaulted the railing. The woman shrieked behind me, the sound splitting the air, inhuman, deafening. A dozen hands clawed from the doorway, reaching for me as I pushed off. And then, I was falling. The wind ripped past me, tearing the scream from my throat. My stomach lurched into my chest as the dark ocean rushed up, black and merciless. I hit the water hard, the cold knocking every ounce of breath from my lungs. I thrashed upward, breaking the surface, gasping. The ship's lights loomed above, massive and indifferent, already drifting away. I screamed, waved my arms, but no one looked. No one leaned over. The cruise just sailed on, silent, leaving me bobbing in its wake. Something brushed my leg. I kicked wildly, heart slamming against my ribs. A hand, or something shaped like one, gripped my ankle. I tore free, kicking harder, gulping in salt water as I fought to stay above the waves. And that's when I heard it. From the deck of the ship, carried faintly across the distance, came the sound of violins. Gentle, joyful, mocking. I wasn't saved. I wasn't free. I'd only traded one fate for another, because the ocean below me was alive with whispers. 100 voices rose up from the deep, surrounding me, pulling me down with promises of a seat at the table. The buffet never let anyone leave. Not really. They swore the ballroom was locked, but I heard the laughter with my own ears. It carried through the steel corridor walls like muffled echoes from a party I wasn't invited to. Music, clinking glasses, and voices that didn't belong to anyone still alive. My name's Evan Miller, I'm 34, and I'd never been on a cruise before this trip. I'm a paramedic out of Denver, Colorado, used to trauma calls and sleepless nights, but not this kind of quiet. My younger sister bought me this ticket after I went through a messy breakup. She told me I needed to recharge before I burned myself out. I wasn't thrilled about spending a week surrounded by strangers, but I told myself maybe the ocean would do me good. I'm not the type to seek out crowds, but I figured I could hide in books, in the sun, and maybe hit the buffet when no one was around. From the moment I boarded, I noticed something odd. One part of the ship, the grand ballroom, was sealed off. The brochures showed glossy photos of it, massive chandeliers hanging above polished marble floors, but, in reality, every door leading there had been padlocked. A polished brass sign outside read, "Restricted area, no entry." Passengers whispered about it during dinner, half joking, half curious. The staff dodged every question. Some said it was under renovation, others claimed it hadn't been used in years. That first night, when most people were at the theater show, I wandered down a quieter corridor near the ballroom. The hall was deserted, and I stopped when I thought I heard something faint. At first I thought it was my imagination, the way ship engines sometimes hum and trick your ears, but then the sound sharpened. Strings. Violin music, sweet and old-fashioned, the kind you'd expect at a formal gala. It was followed by laughter, high, airy, and overlapping, like dozens of people enjoying themselves. I stood at the locked doors. The music was louder here, crystal clear, as if the ballroom was alive and full. I reached for the handle, but the chain held it shut. Then something rattled, quick, like a hand from the other side brushed the handle. My skin prickled, and I stepped back fast. When I told a crew member later, a server carrying trays of drinks, he looked at me blankly, then leaned in slightly and whispered, "Don't linger there after dark." He walked away before I could ask what he meant. I tried brushing it off. Maybe they kept recordings playing for maintenance checks, or maybe sound carried weird through the ship's hull. But that night, when I lay awake in my cabin, I swore I still heard faint, clinking glasses drifting through the ventilation shaft above my bed. The second night should have been better. After all, cruises were supposed to be about settling into a rhythm. Drinks by the pool, movies under the stars, live music. But I couldn't shake what I'd heard outside the ballroom. That laughter still rang in my head like it had been right at my shoulder. I tried convincing myself it was some kind of late-night crew party. But when I asked a bartender casually about it, his smile faltered for a split second. Then, like flipping a switch, he forced his grin back and shook his head. "Ballrooms closed this voyage," he said flatly. "Renovations. Then what's all the noise at night?" I pressed. The way his eyes slid past me told me more than his words. "Maybe you had a little too much last night, sir. Happens on cruises." He chuckled, but it was hollow. That was my first real red flag. By 2 a.m., I was lying in my cabin, staring at the ceiling. A low thrum came through the walls, distant, muffled, but rhythmic. I thought it was the engine, until I recognized the pattern. A waltz. 3 beats, over and over. And under it, a rising swell of clinking glass, cheers, then something that didn't belong, the scraping sound of chairs dragging across wood. I sat up, heart hammering. I wasn't imagining it. In the corridor, the lights were dimmed to night mode, painting everything in a pale orange glow. A few doors down, another passenger stood barefoot in her robe listening. She looked at me and whispered, "You hear it too?" Before I could answer, the sound stopped, cut off mid-laugh, like someone had yanked the record player plug. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. We both stood there, holding our breath. Then, faintly, from behind the ballroom doors 2 decks below us, came the scrape again. Just one long, slow drag. That was the last normal moment of the cruise for me. The next morning, I went down to deck 5. The ballroom entrance gleamed, brass fixtures polished, glass doors locked with a thick chain. A printed sign hung there, "Closed for maintenance. No entry." I leaned closer. The glass was spotless, almost too spotless, but when I cupped my hands around my eyes, I thought I saw something. Smudges, finger streaks from the inside. My stomach turned. I don't know what made me do it, but I pressed my ear to the glass. Nothing. Just silence. Then I realized something strange. The door wasn't cool like glass should have been in the ship's air-conditioned hall. It was warm, almost feverishly warm. When I stepped back, a man in a cream-colored server's jacket was standing a few feet away, watching me. His outfit was crisp, pressed, but not like the crew uniforms I'd seen at dinner. This looked older, like it belonged to another decade. He didn't speak, just smiled faintly, like I was intruding on something. Then he turned and walked briskly down the corridor. I followed. But when I turned the corner, the hallway was empty. Passengers streamed past me later that day at the buffet, chatting and laughing. None of them seemed to notice the man I'd seen, or maybe they just didn't want to. I was starting to realize this wasn't something everyone wanted to acknowledge. That night, I decided I had to test myself. I set an alarm for 1:55 a.m. and waited. At exactly 2, the sound began again. Violins swelling, muffled conversation, glass breaking. This time, I didn't stay in bed. I grabbed my phone, shoved it into my pocket, and went straight for the ballroom doors. As I approached, I swear I saw the faintest glow leaking out from beneath the frame. Golden light pulsing, like chandeliers swaying above dancers. I reached for the handle. The chain rattled against the glass as if something on the other side had tugged it at the same time. My breath hitched. Then a voice whispered right against the back of my neck, low and mocking, "Late for the party, aren't you?" I spun around. The corridor was empty. I should have run. But instead, I raised my phone to record the door. And what showed up on the screen wasn't my reflection. It was dozens of blurred figures swirling in slow motion, their faces turned toward me. And every one of them was smiling. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just lay in bed with the phone on my chest. The recording paused at the exact frame where the glass door showed people who weren't there. Every time I hit play, the figures moved differently. They weren't looping like a glitch. They were reacting, shifting, and always looking at me. By breakfast, I looked wrecked. A woman at my table leaned over with concern. "Rough night?" she asked kindly. I almost told her, but when I opened my mouth, the words froze. Something deep inside warned me that saying it out loud would make it worse. Instead, I just smiled thinly and excused myself. I wasn't the only one hiding exhaustion. In the hallway, I noticed 3 cabins with "Do Not Disturb" signs that hadn't moved in days. And the family I'd seen the first night, the dad in the Hawaiian shirt, the 2 kids, suddenly weren't at meals anymore. No one seemed to notice they were missing. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just noise in the night. It was taking people. The ballroom doors pulled at me like a magnet. That afternoon, when most passengers were out at the pool deck, I snuck back down to deck 5. The chain was still tight, the sign still hanging, but something new was there. On the carpet, right in front of the doors, lay a woman's sandal, one of those cheap cruise ship gift shop kinds. It was damp. I crouched, touched it, and nearly recoiled. The sole was sticky, not with water but with something darker. My hand smelled faintly of iron afterward. I wanted to throw up. Footsteps echoed. I turned, heart pounding, but it was only a crew member with a mop bucket. He glanced at me, then at the sandal in my hand. And without breaking stride, he muttered, "You shouldn't linger here." Then he was gone around the corner, as if he'd just given me the most casual death warning in the world. That night, the music came earlier. It started at midnight sharp, louder than before. The chandelier glow spilled out again beneath the door like golden smoke. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I was standing there with my phone trembling, one hand on the chain. I thought about leaving, about pretending I hadn't seen any of it. I thought about calling security, but I already knew how that would go. Polite smiles, brushed off excuses. They weren't going to help me. I whispered to myself, just one peek. The chain rattled when I pulled. To my shock, it came loose. The lock clattered to the carpet. My blood turned cold. The door creaked inward. Warmth hit me in a wave, like stepping into a crowded room where bodies had been pressed together for hours. The smell was unmistakable. Perfume, cigar smoke, champagne fizz. And then came the sound. No longer muffled, it was overwhelming. Violins, trumpets, a full band, laughter soaring above it. My eyes adjusted, And I realized what I was seeing. The ballroom was alive. Hundreds of people danced beneath crystal chandeliers. Women in sequined gowns, men in sharp tuxedos, hair slicked and glittering. Waiters carried trays of drinks, weaving effortlessly through the crowd. And in the middle, a grand piano played by itself, keys moving without hands. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mouth dry. Every guest moved with elegance, but their faces were wrong. Each smile stretched too wide, each laugh echoing a second too long. Their eyes glistened like glass, unblinking. Then, slowly, dozens of heads turned toward me in perfect unison. The music didn't stop, but the dancing did. I felt every hair on my arms rise. A waiter, tall and pale, broke from the crowd and walked toward me. He held a silver tray with 2 glasses of champagne. He stopped just inches away, extended it with a bow, and said in a voice like velvet, "Your invitation, sir." My throat closed. My legs screamed to run, but my hand twitched toward the glass before I could stop it. I yanked it back. "No," I croaked. The waiter's smile didn't falter, but his eyes flashed something sharp. "No one refuses," he whispered. Behind him, the crowd began to sway, their movements unnatural, jerky, as if strings were pulling them. Their mouths moved together in perfect harmony, whispering words I couldn't catch. That was when the door slammed behind me. The slam of the door echoed like a gunshot. My heart lurched into my throat. I spun, clawing at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The chain that had fallen moments before was back in place, coiled like a serpent around the lock. When I turned again, the crowd had pressed closer. They weren't dancing anymore. They were circling, smiling. Their glassy eyes caught the chandelier light, but none of them blinked. The waiter still held out the champagne flute, his hand perfectly steady. "Drink," he murmured. I shook my head violently. "I don't belong here." That was when the whispers began. Not from one voice, but from all of them at once. Hundreds of lips moving together, words sliding across the air like oil. "You're already here." The chandeliers flickered. For a fraction of a second, the glittering gowns and tuxedos dissolved. I saw bodies bloated with seawater, hair floating as if suspended underwater, eyes sunken but mouths stretched in that same unnatural smile. Then the lights blinked back, and they were beautiful again. I stumbled backward, nearly colliding with a woman in a red dress. She leaned close, her perfume chokingly sweet. "Dance with me," she hissed, her voice cracking in 2 pitches at once. Her hand clamped around my wrist, ice cold and unyielding. I ripped free, heart jackhammering, and darted through the crowd. They parted like a wave, not blocking me, just watching. Some giggled. Others clinked their glasses together in a mocking toast. The music surged louder, swelling until it rattled in my teeth. At the far end of the ballroom, I saw another set of doors. If I could reach them, if they opened, I might have a chance. I shoved past a pair of laughing men, their skin rubbery under my touch, and sprinted. The doors loomed, polished, brass handles gleaming. I yanked them with all my strength. They didn't move. Not an inch. Behind me, the music cut off in an instant. I froze. The silence was suffocating. Then came the sound of hundreds of feet shuffling in perfect unison. I turned slowly. The entire crowd was walking toward me, step by step, their grins frozen. Their shoes clicked together on the wooden floor like soldiers marching. I screamed and pounded the doors, fists aching. "Let me out!" Someone whispered against my ear, though no one was close enough to touch me. No exit, only entry. And then, without warning, the chandeliers above burst, raining shards of glass. The crowd didn't flinch. They only stopped moving and tilted their heads upward, faces illuminated by the flames, now licking across the ceiling. The pianist, still invisible, struck a single, low note, and the whole room laughed at once. I fell to my knees, covering my ears. This wasn't laughter anymore. It was a roar, a chorus of madness that made my bones vibrate. When I dared to look up, the waiter stood inches away again. He leaned down, placed the champagne glass on the floor in front of me and whispered, "You drink, or you stay." The crowd froze, waiting. Not a single breath among them. My hand trembled as I reached for the glass. The stem was warm against my fingers, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. And when I lifted it, the crowd exhaled together. One long sigh that smelled of salt water and rot. I had one thought left before everything blurred. This is a choice no one wins. The glass was almost at my lips when something inside me screamed, louder than the crowd, louder than the piano. "Don't!" I hurled it to the floor. It shattered, fizzing across the wood like acid. The laughter died instantly. Every head snapped toward the broken pieces, their grins faltering for the first time. Then, one by one, their smiles turned downward. Faces twisted, stretching grotesquely, jaws dropping wider than humanly possible. The sound that followed wasn't laughter, wasn't whispers, just a guttural moan, hundreds of voices vibrating together. The chandelier flames snuffed out. Darkness swallowed everything. When my eyes adjusted, the ballroom was empty. No crowd, no music, just a cavernous room lined with tables covered in dust. The air stank of mildew and stagnant water. The waiter was gone. For a moment, I thought I'd escaped. Relief surged through me until I noticed the mirror lining the far wall. In it, I wasn't alone. My reflection was surrounded. The crowd was still there, laughing, dancing, raising their glasses in a toast. But when I turned, the room was bare. Only in the glass did they exist, and in the middle of them all, I saw myself, smiling, holding a full champagne flute. I staggered back, but the reflection didn't follow. It stayed in place, grinning, lifting the glass higher. The others clapped and cheered soundlessly around it. Then the reflection spoke, though its lips barely moved. The words weren't in my ears. They were in my head. "You already drank." I ran. I didn't stop until I burst onto the main deck, gasping the salty night air like a drowning man. The ship was silent, calm, as though nothing had happened. But when I glanced at the glass door behind me, the ballroom's reflection was still lit up with chandeliers, laughter spilling inside it. And I swear I saw myself in there, frozen mid-toast, forever smiling. I never went back. Not to that ballroom. Not to that cruise line. I don't even tell this story to people I know because how do you explain something like this? But sometimes, in the quiet of night, when I'm sitting at home, I hear faint music. A piano drifting through the air, followed by the clink of glasses and muffled laughter. And no matter where I look, there's always a mirror nearby, catching just enough of the light to make me afraid to glance at it. So if you ever find yourself on a cruise, and you pass a locked ballroom that no one ever seems to enter, do yourself a favor. Don't listen. Don't look. And if you hear music behind the doors, keep walking, because some parties don't end. They just wait for you. Story 3. The first time I noticed her, she was staring at me through the reflection of the dining room window. It wasn't her beauty that made me pause. It was the fact that when I turned around, there was no one sitting in the chair behind me. Just the faint outline of a napkin and a glass of water that hadn't been touched. My name is Rebecca Harlan. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a middle school history teacher in Portland, Oregon. This cruise was supposed to be my break from a year that had nearly crushed me. Losing my mother, the stress of single-handedly managing my classroom, and the gnawing sense that life was slipping past me. A friend had convinced me that a week at sea might heal something in me. I didn't expect luxury to feel so hollow, though. The polished brass rails, the endless shuffle of sandals across the decks, even the forced cheer of the cruise director, it all felt like a stage set. Still, I tried to sink into the experience. Ocean stretching endlessly in every direction, salt air clinging to my skin, and the rhythmic thrum of the ship's engines beneath every meal, every conversation, every step in the hallway. At night, though, I began hearing small things that didn't belong. A shuffle of footsteps outside my cabin when the corridor was empty. A soft knock that vanished when I opened the door. Whispers threaded through the ventilation like static. And then, the woman in the reflection. She had dark hair pinned neatly back, her lips painted a shade of red too deep for this casual cruise crowd. Her dress wasn't resort wear. It looked vintage, something out of the 1940s, silk catching the light of the dining room chandeliers. Her eyes, though, they didn't seem fixed on me. They seemed to be staring through me at something else. The second time I saw her, I was standing in line for coffee. Same reflection. Polished steel surface of the espresso machine, and there she was again. No one was behind me. A crew member must have noticed my confusion, because he leaned in and asked, "Are you feeling all right, miss?" I almost told him. But something in his face, a flicker of recognition, quickly buried under a forced smile, made me swallow the words. That night, a new sound joined the knocking and whispering. A faint clink of glass, like someone setting a wine glass down on the table in my cabin. I sat upright in bed, staring into the dimness. My tray table was bare. The glass was still there, though, just audible enough to make my heart pound. I pressed my palms against my ears, whispering to myself that I was overtired, that grief and isolation were twisting my mind. But when I opened my eyes, the reflection of the porthole showed her again, sitting in the chair at my desk, smiling faintly, as if waiting for me to speak. And then came the words. Not from her lips, but from somewhere in the cabin, disembodied and calm. "Don't accept the drink." I barely slept that night. The voice lingered in my head long after the cabin had gone quiet, threading itself through my dreams until I couldn't tell if I had imagined it. By morning, I almost convinced myself it had been nothing more than exhaustion. Almost. At breakfast, I sat alone near the window, sipping coffee and trying to settle my nerves. That's when I caught sight of her again. Not in a reflection this time, but seated 3 tables away. She was real. At least she looked real. Same vintage dress, same polished posture, her hands folded neatly in her lap. But no one around her reacted. The waiters wove past her as if her chair was empty, their trays brushing within inches of her. A couple at the next table laughed, oblivious, their arms practically through her shoulder as they leaned across their plates. I wanted to test it. I stood up, carrying my tray past her table. I slowed just enough to glance down, my heart hammering. The chair was filled. She was there, eyes tilted upward, smiling faintly at me. Then I blinked, and the chair was empty. A sharp voice startled me. Miss, are you okay?" It was one of the waiters, standing by the coffee station, watching me too closely. His tone wasn't casual concern. It was more like someone caught me breaking a rule I didn't know existed. I muttered something about feeling lightheaded and left. The rest of the day, I couldn't shake the sense of being observed. On the pool deck, my sunglasses reflected her silhouette sitting in the lounge chair behind me. In the atrium, I saw her pale face framed in the mirrored elevator doors as they slid shut. Each time I spun around, there was nothing. By late afternoon, I gave in and went to the front desk. "Listen," I began, keeping my voice low. "This is going to sound crazy, but I keep seeing a woman who doesn't seem, well, she doesn't seem real." The receptionist's smile tightened in a way that looked rehearsed. "We've had guests report unusual experiences before. Stress, the motion of the ship, dehydration. It can cause disorientation." "That's not it," I snapped. She's there. I know what I saw." For a flicker of a second, the receptionist's eyes darted to the uniformed officer lingering nearby. He shook his head, almost imperceptibly, and then she leaned forward and whispered, "Don't let her offer you anything." The words punched the air from my lungs. I stumbled back from the desk, her forced smile following me, as if nothing had been said. That night, I locked my cabin door, stuffed towels along the crack at the bottom, and turned on every light. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. At 2:14 a.m., the glass clinking sound returned. My heart thudded as I stared at the desk. Sitting there was a crystal glass filled with deep red liquid, condensation sliding down its sides. I hadn't ordered room service. I hadn't left my cabin. And in the reflection of the porthole, she was there again, raising her own glass in a silent toast. Her lips didn't move, but the voice slithered through the air again, calm and commanding. "Drink and join us." I didn't touch the glass. I shoved it into the bathroom sink, turned the faucet on, and watched as the red liquid swirled down the drain. It smelled faintly metallic, like copper pennies left in the sun. My stomach twisted. When I turned back toward the room, the glass was gone. The sink was empty. Sleep was impossible after that. I kept the TV running, the low hum of canned laughter filling the space like a ward against silence. But by morning, my nerves were wrecked. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. At breakfast, I scanned the dining hall. Families, couples, retirees, kids with ice cream cones way too early in the day. All normal. I was starting to wonder if she'd disappeared for good, until I spotted a young man at the far end of the hall. He was mid-sentence with his friend when a glass appeared on the table before him, as if placed by invisible hands. Tall, crystal clear, filled with that same deep red. My fork clattered onto my plate. I shoved back from the table, heart pounding. His friend didn't even react. They kept talking as if nothing had happened. But the young man stared at the glass with wide, confused eyes. Then, hesitantly, he lifted it. "No," I whispered, but it was already too late. He tipped it back, drank deep, and smiled faintly as though relief had washed over him. The next blink, he was gone. Just gone. The chair sat empty. His friend was still talking, laughing, not noticing the absence at all. I stumbled to the desk again, demanding answers. The receptionist wasn't there this time. Instead, a different crew member stepped forward, a man with graying hair and sharp eyes. "You need to stop asking questions, Miss Calloway," he said softly, but there was an edge beneath his words. "Some doors are better left closed." I pressed harder. "That man. He disappeared. I saw it. You can't just ignore this." His eyes flickered with something close to pity. "Check your daily program," he muttered. "See if his name is listed anywhere." I sprinted back to my cabin, snatched up the booklet they delivered each morning, and flipped through the passenger activities and schedules. There was no trace of the man. Not his name, not even the trivia contest he'd been bragging about the day before. It was like he had never been aboard. A cold certainty sank into my bones. This wasn't just about me. Others had vanished too. I needed to know how deep it went. That night, I roamed the ship with my phone in hand, snapping pictures, videos, anything to prove I wasn't losing it. The woman in the vintage gown appeared more often now, in mirrors, in glass doors, hovering at the edge of crowds. Always with that same faint smile, always with a glass in hand. At 1:07 a.m., an announcement crackled over the PA system, soft but unmistakable. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's complimentary tasting will be held in the ballroom. Midnight sharp, invitation only." The ballroom, the one the staff swore was closed. I felt my blood turn to ice, because in my reflection on the darkened window, she was standing behind me again, lips brushing my ear, though no one was there. "You've been invited." I held out until almost midnight, pacing my cabin, heart hammering. Every rational thought screamed at me to ignore the announcement. But another, darker pull was dragging me to that ballroom. It felt like gravity, like something had already decided I was going, whether I wanted to or not. At 11:55 p.m., I stepped into the corridor. Passengers drifted past, all moving in the same direction, smiling faintly, eyes glazed, like sleepwalkers. None of them spoke. The silence was suffocating. The double doors of the ballroom stood open, though I could have sworn they'd been locked all week. Golden lights spilled into the hallway, along with the distant sound of violins and laughter. I followed the line of passengers inside. My breath caught. The ballroom was alive, chandeliers blazing, tables laid with mountains of food, servers weaving through the crowd with silver trays. But something was wrong. The people weren't right. Their movements were too smooth, too synchronized, like dancers repeating rehearsed steps. Their smiles didn't flicker, and the food, though lavish, smelled faintly of rot beneath the sweetness, as if the fruit bowls hid something spoiled underneath. At the far end, she stood waiting, the woman in the vintage gown. Her skin glowed under the light, too flawless, too polished, like porcelain. Her black eyes fixed on me as though I was the only one in the room. She raised her glass in that silent toast again, and the crowd froze mid-laugh, mid-gesture, until all eyes were on me. I stumbled backward, but invisible pressure pushed me forward. A server appeared at my side, offering me a glass filled to the brim with that same red liquid. His face was blank, his arm steady. "No," I whispered, "I'm not drinking it." The woman's lips curved into something darker than a smile. Her voice carried without moving her mouth. "You already have." My stomach lurched violently. My tongue felt heavy, metallic. I tasted copper. I hadn't touched the glass, but I knew. Somewhere between the shadows, between the reflections, they had already found a way in. The chandeliers flickered. The music warped. I turned to run, only to see that the doors were gone. The entire wall was seamless, polished wood stretching endlessly. The crowd began to laugh again, louder this time, voices blending into a hideous chorus that rattled through my bones. Some clinked their glasses together, though I could swear the liquid inside wasn't wine anymore. I pressed against the wall, desperate for escape, as the woman drifted closer. Her perfume was cloying, thick, suffocating. She leaned in, whispering so close her cold breath brushed my cheek. "There's always room for one more at the table." The last thing I remember is the glass slipping from my hand, the glass I never meant to take, shattering across the floor. The crash of the glass echoed louder than it should have, a sharp crack that silenced the entire room. Every head snapped toward me in unison. The laughter stopped. The music strangled into nothing. I froze, breath hitching in my throat, as the liquid from the shattered glass bled across the floor. It wasn't wine. It was thick, dark, almost black. It pulsed like something alive. The woman in the gown tilted her head, watching me. Her smile never wavered, but I saw her jaw tighten ever so slightly, as if I had broken some unwritten rule. "Not many resist this long," she murmured, though her lips never moved. Her voice came from everywhere at once, vibrating in the air, in my chest, inside my skull. But resisting doesn't mean escaping. The walls seemed to breathe. The chandeliers above flickered out, one by one, until only a sickly glow remained. The crowd of passengers, if that's what they really were, closed in, their faces blurring, smiles stretching unnaturally wide. I pressed against the wall, my nails digging into the wood. "Let me out," I shouted. "You can't keep me here." The woman's black eyes widened slightly, almost amused. "Out?" She gestured toward the vanished doors, the wall that had replaced them. "Out where? You're already here. You always were." The floor beneath my feet shifted. For a split second, I felt it wasn't carpet at all, but something softer. Something that seemed to move under me. I staggered back, horrified, realizing the ground was layered with countless glasses. Shattered, whole, empty, filled. Some of them still clutched in pale, skeletal hands sticking up like weeds through the floor. The crowd erupted into applause. The sound was deafening, inhuman, a roar that filled the ballroom like a storm. My vision blurred. My body grew heavy. I fought to keep standing, but it was as if unseen strings were pulling me down. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was the woman raising her glass high, her voice echoing like a death knell. "To the new guest of honor." I woke up in my cabin. The morning sun streamed through the curtains as though nothing had happened. My clothes were folded neatly at the end of the bed. A tray of breakfast sat untouched on the table. For a moment, I told myself it had all been a dream. Just a nightmare, fueled by fear and imagination. But when I glanced toward the desk, my blood froze. There was a wine glass sitting there, half full. The liquid inside shimmered darkly, pulsing faintly, as though waiting. And when I asked the steward that afternoon why the ballroom had been closed every night, he gave me a puzzled look. Ballroom? Miss, there isn't a ballroom on this deck. I didn't argue. I didn't ask again. But sometimes, late at night, when the ship is at its quietest, I swear I can hear it. The faint echo of laughter, the tinkling of glasses, the distant hum of violins. And each night, when I turn toward the desk, that glass is still there, waiting for me to finish the drink I never remember taking. Story 4. They say the ocean has a way of reflecting back pieces of you that you never wanted to see. I never believed that until the night I saw myself walking down the hallway of a ship I had boarded alone. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't hallucinating. I know what I saw. And once you've locked eyes with a version of yourself that shouldn't exist, there's no going back. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a freelance graphic designer out of Portland, Oregon. I'm not the kind of guy who usually books cruises. I'm more of an introvert, the type who'd rather sit behind a laptop in a coffee shop than mingle with strangers over overpriced cocktails. But after a bad breakup and months of isolation, I thought maybe 7 days at sea would be cleansing, a chance to reset, to get out of my own head. My sister had even joked, "You need people, Ethan, otherwise you'll start talking to yourself." I wish she'd known how close those words would cut. I boarded the ship, expecting awkward dinners and forced small talk. What I didn't expect was the suffocating silence in certain corridors, or the way the crew avoided eye contact when I asked about the ship's layout. And I certainly didn't expect to see a man ahead of me in the hallway wearing my clothes with my gait, my posture, until he turned and I realized I was staring at myself. I froze in the corridor, my hand hovering near the railing, eyes locked on the figure ahead. He was me, down to the faded denim jacket, the same one I'd packed for this trip, with the frayed cuff on the right sleeve. He didn't just resemble me, he was me. I blinked, and in that split second, the hallway flickered with a strange shift in light, like the overhead bulbs were stuttering. When they steadied, he was gone. The only sound left was the deep vibration of the ship's engine, humming beneath my feet. I told myself it was exhaustion. Too much sun. Maybe a drink or two earlier in the lounge. But that didn't explain the smudge on the mirrored wall where his shoulder had brushed as he turned. I reached out, touched it. It was warm. Dinner that night was impossible. I sat at a table for two, alone, picking at a plate of salmon I barely tasted. Across from me, a couple whispered to each other, the woman glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. When our eyes met, she looked startled, almost afraid, as if she recognized me in a way that didn't make sense. Later, in my cabin, I couldn't sleep. I walked down to the observation deck for air. The sea was endless, black waves stretching into nothing. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, keeping pace with mine. Slow. Deliberate. I turned, and again, there he was. Not 10 feet away, standing under the weak glow of a deck light. My face, my eyes. But his expression was wrong. It was empty, like a mask that had forgotten how to be human. I backed toward the door, heart hammering. A crew member appeared just then, a young man in a white uniform jacket. I pointed, breathless. "Do you see him? Right there." The crew member frowned, looking past me. "Sir, there's no one here." When I spun around, the deck was empty. Only the sea, the sound of waves, and the faint smell of salt and fuel. The crew member studied me for a moment, his polite smile not reaching his eyes. "It's common to feel disoriented on long voyages," he said softly, as if reciting a script. "Try to get some rest." Then he walked away, leaving me alone with the shadows. That was the first time I felt it. The sinking realization that maybe no one else could see him. Or worse, that the crew knew more than they were willing to admit. Back in my cabin, I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. I hit record. "If you're listening to this later," I whispered, my voice trembling, take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep these stories alive, and you'll want to hear the rest of this, because I'm not sure how much longer I'll be around to tell it. The lamp on my nightstand flickered. Just once. Then, in the dark reflection of the cabin's glass door, I saw movement. A figure standing behind me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him standing just beyond the door, waiting. I left the lamp on, though the bulb buzzed faintly, flickering like it could die at any second. My suitcase sat open on the floor, and I found myself staring at my own clothes as though they weren't mine anymore, as if he had already worn them before I did. By morning, I thought maybe I'd dreamed it all. The sunlight pouring through the blinds felt sharp, grounding. I forced myself into routine. Shower, breakfast, a walk on deck. That was the last normal thing I'd do that day. At the buffet, I reached for a plate of scrambled eggs, and that's when I saw him again. Not across the room this time. He was right next to me, sliding a plate onto the counter. His hand brushed mine. It was cold, clammy, and it sent a jolt up my arm. I dropped the spoon with a clatter. I spun toward him, ready to shout, but he was already moving away through the line of passengers. No one seemed to notice. No one reacted. Just clinking plates and chatter. I chased him down a corridor, heart racing. But the further I went, the more wrong it felt. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered, with cabin numbers repeating 214, 216, 214 again. My breathing echoed unnaturally, like the air itself was too thick, and at the end of the corridor, he stopped. Slowly, he turned his head, and I saw my own face grin back at me. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped into one of the cabins. The door closed. I rushed forward, grabbed the handle. It wasn't locked. But inside, the room was empty. No luggage, no bedspread, just bare walls, like a cabin under construction. And in the middle of the floor, sitting perfectly still, was a pair of shoes. My shoes. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over myself. I knew I'd left those exact sneakers in my cabin closet. I ran, heart hammering, back to my room, threw open the door, and there they were, the sneakers, in the closet. Exactly where I'd left them. I gripped the door frame to steady myself, shaking so hard I could barely stand. I wasn't losing my mind. I couldn't be, but the ship itself seemed to be bending around him, shaping itself to his presence. That evening, I went to the guest services desk. The woman behind the counter smiled politely. I told her there was someone impersonating me on the ship. I described him in detail. Her smile never faltered, but her pen stilled mid-scribble. "Sir," she said calmly, "you've been logged as the only occupant under your name. Are you sure you're feeling well?" I raised my voice, desperate for her to understand. "I saw him. He touched me." That was when I noticed the security guard step closer, his hand resting lightly on his radio. His eyes didn't leave me. People in the lobby had started staring. Heat crawled up my neck. The receptionist leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Some passengers find the long nights disorienting. I suggest you avoid mirrors for a while." Mirrors? Why would she say that? When I returned to my cabin, I slammed the door shut, every nerve in my body frayed. I poured a glass of water, set it on the nightstand, tried to breathe. But when I lifted it to drink, I saw the reflection in the dark window. He was there again, standing behind me, this time closer, and smiling wider. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. I didn't bother cleaning up the broken glass. It lay in pieces across the carpet, shimmering faintly under the lamp's uneven glow. My pulse pounded in my ears. I paced the cabin, unable to sit, unable to think straight. Every reflection I caught, from the TV screen, the chrome handle of the dresser, even the black glass of the balcony door, seemed to move a fraction slower than me, like it was lagging behind. That night I avoided sleep as long as I could, but exhaustion won. I drifted off, only to jolt awake at the sound of my cabin door unlocking. I sat up, frozen. The handle turned. Slowly the door creaked open, and in the faint hall light, I saw him. He stepped inside like he belonged there, moving with a calmness that was almost worse than violence. His head tilted at me, his grin stretched too wide. Then he slipped into the chair by the desk, folding his hands neatly. It was like watching myself in some warped performance. My own mannerisms, but stripped of warmth. He didn't speak. He just sat there, studying me. I tried to shout, but my throat tightened like something was pressing on it. Finally, I forced out, "What do you want?" No answer, just a slow blink. The air in the cabin grew heavier, thicker, until I was gasping. My vision blurred. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, fumbled to turn on the camera, desperate for proof. When I raised it, the screen showed only me, alone in the room. But I wasn't alone. I bolted for the door, tearing through the hallway barefoot. Crew members glanced up as I passed, but not one of them stopped me. It was like they'd been expecting this. I ran until I reached the atrium, the wide space glowing with chandeliers. I spotted a mirror on the far wall and froze. In its surface, the passengers all walked past normally, but my reflection wasn't following me anymore. It was walking on its own. The double paused, turned toward me from inside the glass, and raised a hand. Slowly, deliberately, he placed his palm against the mirror, and then he stepped out. Gasps rippled through the lobby. A few people screamed, chairs clattered to the floor. But when I turned to them for help, begging them to see what I saw, their faces blurred. Every one of them blurred, except his. He lunged forward, tackling me to the ground. His strength was mine, but more controlled, more deliberate. I felt his hands close around my throat, and just as black spots filled my vision, the weight vanished. I blinked up at the ceiling. The atrium was empty. Not a single passenger, not a single crew member, just me, lying alone on the marble floor. Except, I wasn't lying still. Across from me, another body moved, rising to its feet. My body, my face. He dusted off his jacket, glanced at me with something almost like pity, and walked away. I tried to scream, but no sound came. My voice was gone, my strength drained. And when I finally crawled toward the mirror to pull myself up, the reflection staring back at me wasn't mine anymore. It was his. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at that unfamiliar reflection. My hands trembled against the cool surface of the mirror, but the image smirked back, composed, almost victorious. It wasn't me anymore. Whatever had walked away in my skin had left me stranded in some hollow copy of myself. The ship carried on like nothing had happened. Music drifted faintly from the lounge, laughter echoed from the casino floor. I staggered through the corridors, desperate for someone, anyone, to acknowledge me. But every passenger I passed walked right by, eyes sliding over me like I didn't exist. I shouted, I grabbed at arms, I slammed my fists against walls. No one flinched, no one even looked up. It was as if I'd been erased. Finally, I stumbled back into my cabin. The door clicked shut behind me without my touching it. My things were gone. My suitcase, my clothes, my phone, all replaced neatly with items that weren't mine. The photos on the nightstand showed him with people I didn't know. Crew smiling, passengers laughing, all with him. It was like he'd been here the whole time. I ran to the mirror again. For a moment, just a heartbeat, I thought I saw myself, the real me, staring back, desperate, terrified, pounding to get out. I pressed my palms against the glass. My reflection smiled. And then the lights in the room went out. I'm writing this now with shaking hands, using a notepad I found shoved in the desk drawer. If you're hearing my story, it means somehow my words escaped even if I didn't. Maybe he let them slip through, maybe he wants you to know. So if you ever find yourself on a cruise and you catch your reflection holding your gaze a second too long, don't look back. Don't test it. Because once it steps out, it doesn't leave. And you won't be the one anyone remembers. Story 5. The first night I heard it, I thought I was dreaming. A faint knock, 3 soft taps on the glass door that led out to my balcony. The sound was so distinct, so sharp against the drone of the ship's engines, that it jolted me awake. When I sat up in bed, heart thudding, I could see the faint shimmer of moonlight bleeding around the edges of the heavy curtains. But the strangest part, my cabin didn't have a balcony. My name is Michael Harris, I'm 34, a graphic designer from Portland, Oregon. I'd booked this cruise after a brutal breakup, convincing myself a week at sea would clear my head. I'm not the adventurous type. My friends would tell you I'm more the stay inside, order takeout, binge Netflix guy. But I needed something big to shake me out of that fog, and when I saw the discounted package online, it felt like a sign. A new start, I told myself. Just me, the ocean, and some overpriced piña coladas. The ship was enormous, a floating city stacked with theaters, pools, and endless corridors that all seemed designed to make you forget you were surrounded by nothing but open water. My stateroom was supposed to be interior, no windows, no balcony, cheap, efficient, and perfect for someone traveling alone. But that first night, when I slid the curtains open after hearing those knocks, I froze. A balcony stretched out in front of me, steel railing, sliding glass door. A small table with 2 chairs. Beyond it, the ocean glistened silver under the moon. I stood there for what felt like hours, trying to process it. I remembered the booking details clear as day. No windows, no view, definitely no balcony. My chest tightened, and I had the bizarre sensation that if I stepped out there, I might never make it back inside. The next morning, I almost convinced myself it had been a dream. But when I woke up, sunlight was spilling across that same balcony. The ocean sparkled blue, and other balconies extended in a neat row down the side of the ship. None of it made sense, but I forced myself to play along. I even sat out there with a cup of coffee, trying to ignore the feeling that I was trespassing in my own room. Things only got stranger as the day went on. When I asked the steward who cleaned my cabin about the balcony, he gave me a blank look and insisted my room was an interior stateroom, sir. I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, but his expression never changed. Later, at dinner, I tried to bring it up casually to another couple at my table. Funny thing, my interior cabin somehow has a balcony, I said, grinning. They both frowned. That's impossible, the woman replied, glancing at her husband like I was trying to pull something weird. They don't even build balconies on the inside cabins. That night, I left the curtains open. Around midnight, as the ship rocked gently, I saw movement outside. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of the waves, but then a figure appeared. A man, soaking wet, barefoot, standing on the balcony railing as if he had climbed up from the sea. His skin glistened pale in the moonlight, and his mouth stretched into a smile too wide for his face. He lifted one hand and tapped the glass 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. I stumbled back, slamming into the dresser, eyes wide. When I looked again, the balcony was empty. Just the railing, the table, the endless ocean. My heart wouldn't slow down. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By the next morning, I was questioning my sanity. I even went down to guest services, stammering something about structural mistakes and maybe I was assigned the wrong cabin. The woman behind the counter typed on her keyboard, then slid me a printed slip. Room 3175. Interior. No balcony. Everything looks correct on our end, Mr. Harris, she said with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I went back to my room, determined to prove it to myself one way or another. But when I opened the door, the curtains swayed gently in the air-conditioned draft. Sunlight glowed around the edges, and the balcony waited just beyond. That night, the knocking returned. This time, I didn't move. I lay in bed, forcing myself to breathe quietly, as if pretending to sleep might protect me. The knocks grew louder, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. The sound vibrated through the glass, through the walls, into my bones. I shut my eyes and prayed it would stop. Then I heard something worse. A low, wet laugh. I didn't sleep, not even a minute. The faint echo of that wet, hollow laugh followed me as I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the balcony. My rational mind tried to talk me down. It's stress. You're alone. The ocean plays tricks at night. But when I slid the curtains aside, the balcony was there again, perfectly intact. And standing on the railing this time, barely moving, was a figure that looked familiar. Too familiar. I rubbed my eyes. Sweat prickled my neck. The figure lifted its hand, slow, deliberate, as if beckoning me. My first instinct was to retreat, but some part of me, curiosity, fear, or plain disbelief, made me step closer. Then, the railing shifted. It stretched longer than it should have, the balcony expanding subtly, impossibly, as if it were breathing. My cabin behind me seemed smaller, squashed, distant. The floorboards creaked under my feet, but not in the way they usually did. Each step sounded muted, hollow, echoing against an invisible wall. I stumbled back, my fingers scraping the railing. The ocean below was unnaturally still, too calm, reflecting the moon like polished silver. And beneath the surface, hundreds of eyes stared up. Not fish, not reflections. Pale human eyes, unblinking, watching, following. A knock sounded behind me. Tap, tap, tap. I spun. My own cabin door? Closed. Locked. Except the sound came from the balcony itself. My stomach dropped. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. I spent hours leaning against the railing, watching as the ocean seemed to ripple, but not with water. The faces began moving. Slowly at first, rising from the depths, dragging wet bodies onto the balcony floor. No one else could see them, of course. Passengers walked past in the corridors below, crew chatting politely, oblivious to the spectacle on my floor. I tried to warn anyone. I screamed, pounded on the walls. The steward passing by just gave me a polite nod, glancing at his clipboard, walking away. As if my terror were nothing more than a minor disruption. I even called the front desk. "There's something wrong with my balcony," I said, voice trembling. A clerk answered, calm, almost bored. "Sir, your room is fine. Interior stateroom. Enjoy your stay." It was infuriating and terrifying all at once. I backed away from the railing and the figures, but as I turned to retreat into the room, the sliding glass door vanished. Just a smooth, solid wall where it had been minutes ago. Panic gripped me. I grabbed the nightstand, pulled the drawers open. Anything I could use as a weapon. The water on the balcony shimmered unnaturally. One figure approached me, pale, dripping, a grin too wide. It lifted a hand, motioning me closer. My stomach twisted. I could feel my own reflection moving differently in the window behind me, mimicking me, but with deliberate delay. I stumbled backward, tripping over the table. My foot hit something soft. I looked down and froze. A pair of wet shoes, not mine. One step closer, and the shoes were gone. Time became elastic. Minutes felt like hours, hours like seconds. Each tap on the railing, each whispering laugh, each pale face rising from the water hammered into my mind. I thought I was losing it. And then, almost casually, I noticed something impossible. Across the balcony, a second sliding door appeared. Not the one to my cabin, but another. A door that hadn't existed when I first arrived. Behind it, dim light flickered. Shadows moved. Music, soft, distorted. Laughter echoed faintly through the wall. A voice called my name. Michael. I froze. It was my own voice, or close enough to make my blood run cold. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs refused. Some twisted curiosity, or maybe fear itself, pulled me toward the door. Step by step I approached, heart hammering. Before I reached it, I remembered something I'd read in a shipboard brochure, buried among the tourist tips. Decks and corridors may shift slightly during heavy seas. Do not be alarmed. Heavy seas? I laughed bitterly. There were no storms tonight. Nothing to explain what was happening. And then I heard it. A whisper just behind my ear. "Don't come closer, Michael." I spun. The balcony was empty. The ocean calm. The faces vanished beneath the surface. The railing had returned to its normal position. The second door, the flickering light gone. I stumbled back into my room, shaking, drenched in sweat. Tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, my mind breaking under the isolation. But I couldn't. Not entirely. And as I lay down that night, listening to the ship creak and the water slap against the hull, I knew the balcony was waiting, watching, growing. I couldn't sleep. Not really. My eyes kept flicking to the sliding glass door, the balcony just beyond it, and every time I blinked, it felt like it had moved slightly. Wider, longer, different. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but the feeling in my gut screamed otherwise. Something on this ship was very wrong. By the third night, the ship's usual sounds, the distant hum of the engines, muffled conversations in corridors, the clinking of dishes in the dining hall, had faded for me. It was as if a bubble of silence surrounded my cabin. The balcony was alive in that silence. I stood there, hands gripping the railing, staring down at the ocean. The water glistened silver in the moonlight, perfectly calm. But then I saw movement beneath the surface. Faces, hundreds of them, eyes wide open, mouths moving without sound. And then, something impossible, they were climbing. Not just the pale figures from before, others. People I recognized from the cruise. The couple from the buffet who'd vanished a few nights ago. A man who worked in the casino. A child I'd seen running down the hall earlier in the day. All climbing slowly onto the balcony, silent, dripping wet, eyes fixed on me. I stumbled backward, slamming into the wall. The sliding door I'd been using as a lifeline had disappeared again, leaving only the smooth, white wall. I was trapped. I ran to the telephone, dialing guest services. My hands shook. There's something on the balcony! People! They're not alive! I shouted. The line was dead. I slammed the receiver down, trying again. Still dead. The balcony figures edged closer, their motions slow, deliberate, almost mocking. Each face reflected a distorted version of themselves, pale and soaked, grinning unnaturally. The air was cold now, icy against my skin, despite the tropical breeze outside. Then came a sound I'll never forget, a knock on the wall where the sliding door should have been. 3 sharp taps. Tap, tap, tap. My chest seized. It was coming from inside the wall, not the balcony. Inside. I sank to the floor, pressing my back against the wall, trying to make myself invisible, praying they wouldn't notice me. The figures didn't vanish. They advanced slowly, stepping across the balcony that now stretched impossibly far from my cabin. The ocean beneath them reflected not the moonlight, but their pale faces. I remembered the stories I'd read before boarding, the urban legends of cruise ships with secret decks, corridors that shifted, rooms that didn't exist. I had laughed at them, but now I understood. This ship was alive, and I was in its trap. A faint whisper reached my ears. I froze. It wasn't coming from the balcony or the ocean. It was inside my own head. Come with us. The voice sounded like my own, but deeper, slower. My stomach turned. Then I heard it, the wet slap of footsteps inside my room. Slow, deliberate. 1 step, 2 steps, closer, closer. I scrambled to the balcony, desperate. The railing had stretched even farther, creating a corridor of deck that seemed endless. The figures advanced toward me, their hands reaching, mouths moving in silent chants. I could see my own reflection in the water below. A Michael who wasn't me, grinning, beckoning me forward. I backed against the white wall. Tap, tap, tap. The 3 knocks echoed in perfect rhythm. I didn't dare look. My breathing was ragged. My heart raced so fast it hurt. Then came movement behind me. The door. It reappeared. Light spilled through it, dim but warm. A crew member appeared, walking casually, clipboard in hand. "Room inspection," he said, completely normal, smiling. "Everything seems fine, sir. Is there anything wrong?" I wanted to scream. "Do you see them? Behind me? On the balcony? The others?" I shouted. He blinked. "Sir, your balcony is fine. Nothing unusual reported. Perhaps you're tired." I sank to the floor, shivering, realizing no one else would see it. No one else would believe it. The ship had isolated me, folding its reality around me. And then, Faintly, I heard a voice behind me again. My own voice, calling from the balcony. Michael, I didn't want to look. I didn't want to move. But I knew I would have to. Because if I didn't, I might never step back into my own life again. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. Every creak of the ship felt amplified, each groan of metal like a warning. I stayed pressed against the wall, eyes fixed on the balcony, praying it would remain static, praying the ocean below wouldn't reflect the impossible horrors I had glimpsed. But it didn't. When I finally forced myself to stand, the balcony was different, wider, longer. Impossible angles twisted its edges, making it seem like a platform extending into the void. The pale faces I had seen before weren't there, at least, not entirely, but I could see shadows moving beneath the glassy water, stretching upward, waiting. And then I saw him, my double. It wasn't just a reflection in the glass. It was a version of me, soaked, hair plastered to his skull, eyes wide, grinning that impossible smile. He raised a hand, slow and deliberate, beckoning me to step forward. I wanted to run, but my feet felt cemented to the carpet. My own reflection moved out of sync with me, teasing, taunting, mirroring every thought I didn't dare speak. I tried to call out, "This isn't real! You're not real!" My voice was weak, swallowed instantly by the hum of the ship. Then came a faint sound behind me. The sliding door, the one that had appeared and disappeared at will, slid open. Through it, I saw the hallway. A passenger, the one I had noticed missing from the buffet days ago, emerged silently. His expression blank, eyes dark, and when he reached the balcony, he froze. Then he looked at me, and a tiny, inhuman grin flickered across his face. I backed up. Tap, tap, tap. The railing groaned under weight that wasn't mine. Faces from the water began rising again, hundreds of pale shapes, reaching, and my double stepped forward. I stumbled backward. My hand found the phone on the nightstand. "Hello? Security?" I screamed into it. Static. Only static. A chill gripped me as I realized something crucial. The crew I'd seen earlier weren't there. The inspection had been a trick, a pause, an illusion. Now the ship itself seemed alive, bending reality, folding time and space to isolate me. I thought of the brochure's line again. Decks and corridors may shift slightly during heavy seas. No storm. Nothing could explain this. I had been lured, and the ship had the upper hand. Then a sound I'll never forget, a whisper, coming from all directions at once. "Join us." The ocean beneath the balcony shivered. The pale faces lifted, their mouths opening wide, silent screams. My double grinned, stepping closer, hand outstretched. My heart pounded in my ears, adrenaline surging. I wanted to run, wanted to leap back into the cabin, but the door had vanished again, replaced by that smooth white wall. The faint echo of the taps on the balcony railing pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Tap, tap, tap. Each one closer than the last. I made a choice. I stepped forward. The railing felt impossibly solid beneath my fingers, though I knew it shouldn't have. My double stood there, grinning, and behind him the water had churned into a mirror of pale faces, each one reaching higher, silent, relentless. Every instinct screamed at me to turn, to run, but there was no door, no escape, only the balcony, stretching into nothing. I took a hesitant step forward. My double mirrored it perfectly, every movement exaggerated, deliberate. "Michael!" His voice was mine, but warped, hollow. "Step forward, join us." A wave of nausea hit me. I could see all the missing passengers now, emerging from the water onto the balcony. Silent, blank-eyed, beckoning. I recognized their faces, their clothing, fragments of their last moments on the ship. They reached toward me, some clawing at the railing, others stretching out with hands that were impossibly long. I stumbled. My foot slipped, and I nearly fell into the glassy water below. But the surface rippled, and instead of drowning, I saw glimpses. Dozens of versions of myself, trapped, each one screaming silently beneath the reflection. I wanted to fight, to resist, but the pull was overwhelming. The double's grin widened impossibly. I raised a trembling hand, almost instinctively, toward him. Then, in the corner of my vision, I saw the door flicker. A faint light appeared, barely visible through the white wall. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that a choice existed. My heart raced. Could I reach it? Step back into reality? Or would I be trapped forever, just another pale reflection on the balcony of a ship that didn't exist? I lunged, every ounce of energy, toward the flickering door. The double's hand reached for mine. Tap, tap, tap. The railing shook violently. The faces below surged upward, mouths opening wide, silent screams filling my head. I felt a hand grip my wrist. Not my double's, but something colder. I struggled. My foot slipped again. The balcony stretched farther than it should have, tilting impossibly. My vision blurred. The faces from the water, passengers, reflections, versions of me, all pressed closer. I jerked awake on my cabin floor, heart hammering, gasping. The balcony was gone. Just the blank wall where the sliding door should have been. Sunlight streamed through a tiny porthole. I was alone. But when I reached for the phone to call guest services, I noticed it. The reflection in the screen. My own face, pale and wet, smiling back at me, though I hadn't moved. And behind me, on the carpet, faintly pressed into the fibers, were wet footprints leading nowhere. I've been on this ship for 3 more nights. The balcony hasn't appeared again. Yet sometimes, when the engines hum low and the moon is high, I hear the taps. Tap, tap, tap. And I know in the back of my mind that it's still waiting. If you're listening, take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep stories like this alive. The question I can't escape: was it real? Or am I already trapped somewhere between the balcony and the ocean, waiting for the next Michael to take my place? Story 6. This is the quietest cruise I can recall. It was devoid of the typical noise of motors, passenger talk, and glass clinking. It was just me making my way down a poorly lighted hallway to Deck 5, the location of the theater. I'm a 26-year-old Seattle-based freelance sound designer named Olivia Harper. When I booked this trip, I was anticipating for a quick getaway with sunsets, jazz evenings, and some inspirational CDs. I received something else. For late-night travelers, the theater has been marketed as a private cinematic experience and a hidden gem. Curious about the vacant hall after the last screening, I had sneaked in. There was a slight mildew odor coming from the hallway, the carpet was wet, and the lights flickered like weary eyes. I made it to the door. In contrast to the ornate entries on the main deck, this one was made of simple metal, with only a little plate that said "Private access only." The door creaked open before I ever touched it. I assumed that the theater was empty. The emergency lights showed weakly on rows of soft red seats. A flicker of static on the screen. No film. Popcorn and wet fabric filled the air. A single PA announcement that said, "The silent theater will begin shortly," buzzed feebly. I intervened, saying, "Please stay seated." My footsteps sounded strangely, and the enormous hall nearly instantly engulfed them. Then I spotted footprints. No, not mine. The first row is preceded by wet footprints. I heard my name whispered. I froze and said, "Olivia." There shouldn't have been anyone there. I looked around the chairs. Everywhere is empty. However, a faint echo of inaudible, low murmurs filled the theater. A brass packet that resembled a ticket was resting on the seat as I arrived at the front row. It has my name inscribed on it. I took it up. It became really cold. I could see my breath in the dim light. A silhouette shifted behind the screen. My camera was up, and I zoomed in. A pale, rigid figure with vacant eyes remained motionless in a crew uniform. Not a hello. Not even acknowledgement. Simply observing. The screen flickered once more, and then I could see that the rows of chairs stretched well beyond the walls. The room contorted, inconceivable angles. The rows stretched farther and farther as I went, growing in numberless. I felt like running as the whispers, "She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be here," repeated, layered, and overlapped. Everything was captured by my camera, but as I looked back at the pictures, I saw faces looking blankly at me from the rows of people who had disappeared from other decks days earlier. I attempted to go. There were no doors to the theater from which I had entered. Rather, it opened a little side door that led to another row of seats. The key gleamed dimly and warmly in my fingers as it fell out of my pocket, though oddly, I couldn't recall placing it there. The muttering grew louder. I gripped the key and gazed at the countless rows. Too fast to follow, shadows shifted among the seats. Then, a clear female voice said, "You record everything? Yes? Make sure they don't forget." I shuddered. The PA buzzed once more. "Welcome. Enjoy the show." I couldn't take my eyes off the seats, which stretched beyond than any theater ought to. Overlapping in layers, some familiar, others unfamiliar, the whispers became louder. Whenever I believed I had counted the rows, another one kept popping up. I held the brass key firmly. Its warmth pulsed in my palm, almost alive. It was then that I became aware of the reflections. Shapes crushed against the wall-to-wall mirrors didn't belong to me. Pale, staring faces of absent passengers, mouths slightly wide and sluggish, uncanny synchronization of movements. I walked back toward the side door in the hopes of getting out. Every footfall reverberated too long. Now I hear gentle, purposeful footsteps behind me, trailing every stride, nothing there as I spun. There are only moving shadows between the seats. I described my own incredulity and the impossibility of the architecture in a whisper into my recorder. Every time I looked at the screen, the static changed, revealing faces I had never seen before, faces that were staring at me from perspectives that were difficult to capture in person. Once more, the key glinted. I placed it into a little brass hole set into the stage's edge without thinking. The floor trembled. A concealed panel opened, exposing a slender staircase that led downward and was dotted with faint, trickling lights. I was hesitant. I wanted to run, but curiosity prevailed. With the camera capturing every moment, I entered the stairwell. The whispers had now become words. "Don't leave, don't leave, don't leave." At the bottom was a flooded room, with water ankle-deep and rippling as if it had a pulse. My footfall echoed in time with the voices. Shadows twisted beneath the surface like warped hands. Additionally, passengers were sitting in chairs above the water, staring silently. Bodies rigid, eyes wide. A few are still wearing damp nighttime attire. Suddenly, a crew member with a spotless uniform and an unreadable look emerged at the far end. She made a motion toward the travelers. "They observe. You take notes. That's your job." Panic swept through me. Even though I didn't understand her, I felt the pressure of her words. I began compulsively recording every detail, every whisper, and every impossibility of reflection. In the unlikely event that someone stumbles upon this, please subscribe to Midnight Outcry if you enjoy these true cruise horror stories. Your support keeps these confirmed testimonies alive. As I approached the ocean, I tried to spot a familiar face. I froze after that. Brighter, the brass key bobbed just above the surface. Unnatural shapes were formed by the abrupt shifting of shadows beneath the sea. From above the vents came a gentle melody. Every note made my stomach turn, yet I was unable to identify the song. The heads of all the passengers turned to face me simultaneously. I was pulled toward the water. My legs moved without my help. I attempted to back away and yelled, but something invisible pressed. There seemed to be no end to the chamber. All the chairs multiplied. All the reflections were repeated. Elastic time broke and stretched. I swung around when I heard someone speak, right into my ear. "You can leave. if you give something in return? Nobody. She was only my sister, but she wasn't truly her. Like the others, she had a vacant stare. The air was cold and heavy, with a stench of metal and wet cloth. I felt like I was being drawn toward the sea by unseen strings as my legs moved. Despite the absence of any walls, every footfall reverberated. Soft and eerie, the lullaby persisted, resonating into my chest through the vents. I got to the edge of the chairs that were drenched. I saw faces staring back at me, faces of missing passengers, some with their mouths open in mute screams, others pallid and frozen. Their unblinking, immovable eyes tracked every step. My equilibrium was thrown when I attempted to take a step back due to a subtle tilt in the floor. The theater itself seemed to be alive, moving seats, expanding rows and changing angles as though it could sense my anxiety. And then, I caught sight of her. On the opposite side of the wet hallway stood a young lady. I recognized her as my sister. For a brief moment, relief flooded her face, but her eyes were dark and blind. She gestured me closer with a gradual hand lift. My heart pounded as I hesitated. She is not alone, I thought to myself. She now participates in it. The brass key in my pocket pulsed. I extracted it. The sea rippled in the light of its brilliance. Shadows flinched back abruptly as soon as I raised it over the surface, and the vacant rows of chairs glistened. It felt like the theater was bending in on itself. I understood that the key was the only means of navigating this impossibly difficult area, not merely a tool. Abruptly, a crew member stepped onto the stage, uniformly precise and expressionless. She pointed to a secret panel beneath the screen. I knew at once that this was my route, the only opportunity I have. "Join us, stay forever, don't leave," were whispers that suddenly formed comprehensible sentences. But I ignored them as I waded into the knee-deep water. All the reflections in the mirrors twisted horribly. One moment my sister's face was human. The next it was blank and pale, blending in with the crowd. After taking a deep breath, I continued walking in the direction of the small panel the crew guy had indicated on stage. I pulled the panel open. A slender staircase twisted into the shadows. Every footfall reverberated in unfathomable time, compressing and expanding as though the theater were alive. I turned to see my sister transfixed in the water, looking and moving her lips in a distorted lullaby without making any sound. I sprinted. Then came the gentle, coordinated footsteps from all sides. Below the surface of the lake, shadows rolled up toward me. I held on to the key firmly. A door at the bottom, plain, unmarked, wooden. I jammed the key into a frame slot. With a moan, the door slowly opened. It gushed light, warm, true light. I tumbled through and into the decked area above. I fell. Above, the theater was gone. The audience, the whispers, the swamped auditorium, the impossible rows were all gone. I had lost my sister. But the key was in my possession, the memories too, and someplace deep in the ship there was a reverberating echo, the smallest of 3 intentional knocks. I staggered, my heart pounding, onto the upper deck. The sun had risen, and the average cruise ship was bathed in ordinary light. I was unable to unsee what I had seen, though. With my voice shaking, I hurried to guest services. It's not conceivable. Deck 5, the theater. There were people. The clerk, calm and courteous, blinked. The 5th deck does not have a theater. Are you feeling okay, sir? My pulse accelerated. My gut told me that they were lying, so I left guest services and strolled the decks in search of any evidence, sign, or anyone that could support my tale. With hollow eyes, the crew walked past, grinning and guiding the passengers. One mirror caught my eye in a polished handrail, with rows of faces silently and unblinkingly staring back at me. Curiosity and fear mixed that night, and I went back to Deck 5. The door was gone. There was no water, no murmurs, and the passage was as long as normal. just the faint echo of a gentle lullaby in my head, the dim emergency lights, and the carpet. I attempted to investigate the ship's logs, but Deck 5 revealed regular passenger usage, no strange reports, and no maintenance problems. It seemed as though I was the only reason the theater existed. The metal key was still in my pocket, though, and it was gleaming dimly in the darkness. I couldn't abandon it. There was something that made me want to hold it. I felt a mild, persistent pull toward the back of the ship as soon as I did. Layered and frantic, the whispers came back. Come back, come back, come back. The shadows in the edges of my vision appeared denser, almost to life. I took a step back, filming everything since I knew no one would believe it. Then the 3 intentional knocks came, slow, deliberate, reverberating from imaginary walls. Every instinct in me warned of danger, and I froze. The sound originated from the theater itself, from the ship, from the area between reality and nightmare, not from a door or a floor. The theater had not disappeared, which was a sad realization. It had just given me a moment's freedom. And it would wait. For all the others, this was the last pulse of the key. There was a slight glimmer in the air, a distortion, like a doorway emerging from thin air. Then, the knocks ceased. Stillness. My sister didn't come back. There were still unaccounted for passengers. The ship continued, all other things being normal and happy. However, I still have the recollection. The secret. This lullaby was whispering. And the knowledge that the theater below deck is still waiting for the next inquisitive person. Hentet is an Anne.